If you would please, Mr. Kerr, would you mind identifying yourself so we're on the tape that people will know who we are talking about?
Well, I'm James C. Kerr.
Of Geary,
I
Oklahoma.
live in Geary, Oklahoma at the present time.
And are you retired?
Retired.
Do you find enough to keep you busy for being retired?
Well, they didn't make me retire till I was 76 years old.
You are 76 years old?
I'm 79.
You are?
But the people I associated with let me work as long as I want to. I could still been working if I hadn't retired, I expect.
Well, you were born in Oklahoma. You were born in Logan County, but your parents, I understand your parents are G.W. and Viola E. Kerr from Illinois.
That's where they originally came from.
But how did they get down here? Did they come down in a covered wagon or something?
They lived in Christian County, Illinois, and my dad got out of the Civil
Wait, that was Christian, okay.
My dad was in the Civil War, and when he got out of the Army, why, of course, him and my mother, they met, I guess, and were married, and they had a pretty good farm, and that is, they lived in Illinois for several years before they moved. And then my dad, he was in the Army, and he wanted to, feet got itchy, I guess, so he decided to move to western Kansas because he could, being a soldier, he could settle what they call settle on a whole section of land to give the government. And
do you know whether your grandfather was hurt or anything, or a prisoner or anything like that during the Civil War? Did he get through without being?
It wasn't my grandfather.
I mean your
father.
Your father.
No, I don't think he was. He was just a boy, and I don't think he was. Actually, he run off and joined the Army, and his dad went and got him before he was old enough. And so later on, I run off again. His dad he said, just let him go this time.
About how old was he then, Mr. Kerr?
Oh, I guess he's probably 15 or 16.
Oh, and the first time he was probably 12 or 14.
Anyway, why, they sold their farm in Illinois. They had a real good farm, my mother said. I was back there one time with me and her on a visit, and it was a real good farm, and they had stock and everything. They had quite a bit of money when they moved to western Kansas. My dad's brother was a doctor, a genuine doctor, graduated. He was in the Union Army too. He was in the medical corps.
Just let me come in a minute, Mr. Kerr. What department was your father in?
He was in the infantry.
Infantry, okay.
And so my dad, when he come back out of the Army and this doctor came back, why, he started in with him to study. That's kind of the way they got a start then. They studied with another doctor for a while and then had to go to school. Well, he worked with my brother, or his brother, as a doctor for a while, and he decided he didn't want to be a doctor. He didn't like it. So I guess after that when he got married, and he had a couple of children back in Illinois, and then they moved to Kansas.
You're talking about western Kansas, where that Meade area?
Way up to pretty close to Greeley, offhand. He was. Anyway, it wasn't very far from the Colorado line. Yeah. Me and my brother went to the Yellowstone Park one time. We went by and went on this farm. My dad used to tell us how he dug a well there to get water.
Water was a problem in western Kansas.
So we decided we'd go and see it. Sure enough, we went to the county seat and found where it was and went, and the darn well was right there. And people lived there, and they said, man, that's the best well in this country.
What happened lots of times, I believe, in western Kansas, they built a lot of paper towns up there, you know, the railroads were coming in and they just, was he part of this? Or do you know?
Well, now, he, like I say, he knew quite a bit about drugs and stuff like that. So he got the idea of starting a store out there in some little old jerkwater town, I guess. And my mother and the kids, they lived on this farm and settled it up, they call it. Because we had to live on a certain length of time and prove it up.
You say prove it up.
Yeah, so they get the title for it. And so my dad had to haul his supplies from about 30 miles to the railroad up. There wasn't no railroad where they were.
Well, Santa Fe was building a railroad.
Oh, this was, I think it's Union Pacific. Southern Pacific or something. Went out through that part of the country. Anyway, why, they had quite a tussle out there. They raised some crops, but there wasn't no sale for nothing. There was no place to sell it, see.
And well, crops are very insecure, weren't they, because of weather conditions and things like that.
But they finally, my dad and people out there, of course, most of them didn't have no money, especially after the first year or two. And,
they spent
he
it all.
sold his dang goods out on credit, and first thing you know, he was broke, and everybody else was broke, and he got disgusted, and he traded this farm out there for one down in Missouri. And this time, they went in a covered wagon.
From western Kansas to Missouri.
To Missouri.
You remember what was it, Joplin, Missouri, or Springfield, Missouri?
No, it wasn't over in Missouri very far.
Well, Joplin is right on the border. It's Southwest City is right over there.
Might have been close to that, I don't know. But anyhow, they lived over there for, I don't know how long, a year or two, I guess. And he got some kind of fever or malaria or something over there, and that kind of must have been kind of wet. And he couldn't stand it over there, so of course his feet hurt and he had to move around again, I guess.
They were itching at least. Mr. Kerr, let's go back to western Kansas a little bit. We realize that when you get into western Kansas, you don't have any building materials, you don't have any logs. Did they build a half dugout or a sod house, or do you know?
Sod house. Do
you know anything?
Part of it was lumber.
Do you know anything about the construction or how they went around that, or did he ever tell you?
No, I don't.
You don't know the size of it? What, 12 by 15 or 12 by...
I think it's bigger than that. The darn house is still there.
It is still there now?
It was there when we was out there.
It's a half dugout.
Well, no, it was built on top of the ground.
Oh.
It's sod.
Oh, it was a sod house.
Yeah,
Is it still out there?
Well, I don't know if it's still there or not.
Well, when was this when you saw it last?
I haven't been there since 26.
Oh, well, it's probably not there.
Not more.
But what they used to do, I think, they used to get the sod out. If I'm wrong, you can correct me. Or you can tell me how they did it. That's what I'm trying to
They
find.
had a plow, and they just plowed up the fur, and they took an axe or something, and just cut in chunks like blocks.
You're talking pieces about 18 inches long?
Probably about.
And then they stacked it like bricks?
Well, they just lay it up like bricks or concrete blocks.
And then when they got through with that, how did they finish the outside of it?
Well, I don't think they finished it. They just left it alone. I think on the inside, I know one of them, after folks moved to Oklahoma, part of the house we lived in down there was a sod house.
Okay, now on the inside, how did they finish the inside? What did they do for a roof on the thing?
Oh, they put a regular board roof on.
They did, if they had the boards. Now, in the event they didn't have boards and had sod, how'd they get around that?
I think maybe they kind of laid the sod up on just kind of like shingles.
Oh.
I really don't know about that.
And then, did they finish it on the inside, the sod on the inside at all?
Well, they probably smoothed it off, and they probably either whitewashed it or put papers on it. I know my mother took spike nails about so long in this building paper.
You're talking something like a 16-penny nail or something like that.
And spiked them into this sod, and then after that was done, then she took regular paper, like you paper rooms.
Oh, wait a minute, she spiked boards against the side, is that what you say, or just?
Building paper.
Building paper, okay. And then she put paper on top of that.
She put pretty paper on that.
And they had, what did they have, dirt floors, or do you remember?
No, there's wood floors.
No, they hauled the lumber from a distant railroad place.
Yeah.
Okay, did they have windows in it, glass windows, or did they use oilcloth?
I think some of the windows was oilcloth, but some of them was glass.
Mm-hmm. They probably didn't have too many doors and windows.
Well, I think the oilcloth was on the screen doors, on the doors,
Uh-huh.
and the windows was in.
Sometimes they used to take oiled paper or something like that and put it over the window.
I think this was cloth, it was oil.
Now, when you're out in western Kansas, we're going to get back to Missouri again. When you're out in western Kansas, you don't have any wood or things like that for fire. Now, did they use buffalo chips?
Yeah.
Can you remember how buffalo chips burned? Did they make a good fire?
Well, I wasn't there.
You weren't there. But
I wasn't
maybe,
born until I got down to Oklahoma.
oh, well, maybe you have been able to tell me. Did buffalo chips make a good hot fire?
I guess it does, because that's all they
That's
burned.
all they burned. Well, I think they probably went into some of the railheads and got cold sometimes
Yeah, more likely.
to work that. But about the only trees that you had out there was along your creek bottoms. Okay, now, when he was out in western Kansas, one of them was in the store selling drugs. Did they do any farming?
Oh, yeah.
What were they farming at? What kind of? They weren't putting in wheat. What were they putting? Head feed or something like that?
Well, I think they had to raise feed for the stock, but they did raise wheat, too.
They did. Were they using this Russian red or whatever they call it?
Turkey red.
Turkey red. Now I'm getting it somewhere. Wasn't that let me see, on a turkey red, wasn't that a development of Darwin or somebody like that?
No, I think they got it from Russia.
From Russia by accident. Now, didn't, in that particular area of Kansas, didn't a lot of Mennonites and things like that, or do you know?
I don't know nothing.
Okay, well, you probably wouldn't know. But anyway, they left there, and we're going to get back to Missouri. I'm sorry, but what's happened, you got in something I like to talk about.
Yeah.
And I don't know who's doing the interviewing here. Then your parents went over to Missouri.
Yeah.
Okay, now we'll go up from there. Were you born in Missouri?
No, I was born in Oklahoma.
You were born in Oklahoma, okay. Well, let's get down into...
Well, like I say, he couldn't stand that climate, so he had a cousin that came down. He was in old Oklahoma over there he lived about 2 miles over in Garfield County. And so my dad come down there to visit him. See, that was long, well, just a little bit after that run.
Oh, after 1889.
Yeah, not a year. Fact of the matter, I think he came down there figuring on going to the run, and he didn't get there somewhere anyway. But anyway, he went to visit this man, and his name was Harv Watt.
W-A-T-T-S?
No, just T-T.
Oh, what? What's his first name?
Harv.
Harvin?
H-A-R-V-E.
Oh, okay.
And he was my mother's relation. My mother's name, my mother's mother was named Watt, see?
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And they claimed that they were a direct descendant of Sir James Watt over in England.
Oh.
Who made the steam engines work, and they named the Watt electric after him. He's supposed to be a real smart old man.
He doesn't know what he got it into, did he?
Anyhow, when my dad was there visiting, he found out about this farm down there in Logan County about 2.5 miles, I think, south of where Harv Watt lived. So they found out this guy was willing to sell a trade, so him and my dad rigged up a trade. He traded this farm in Missouri for this farm down here in Logan County.
Is that the one, that at Marshall?
Well, it's southwest, it's southeast of Marshall, about
Okay.
3 miles. And, so they made another trip then in the wagon from Missouri down to.
In a covered wagon this
Yeah,
time again?
Yeah.
Oh, well, can you recall that what, if they said, what kind of roads they had?
No, they just trails.
Just trails.
The prairie, my mother would talk about them shooting prairie chickens and quails and rabbits and stuff. My dad had an old double-barrel muzzle-loaded shotgun. He was a heck of a good shot, however. And she said that they hadn't had that gun, they'd starved to death. So there was no place for nothing to buy anything, and then they wasn't very well healed anyway.
Well, they probably stopped and got a few fish too along the way.
Yeah, fish. And Dad said sometimes they'd have to use beans, or if they had any beans, or they'd pick up little rocks along the creek and to find some wire somewhere, they'd cut chunks of wire off and make a shot, use it for shot.
That would be kind of tough on a rifling of the barrel, wouldn't it?
Well, they didn't have a shotgun on that rifle.
Uh-huh.
Smooth bore.
Oh.
Anyhow, she said that the grass, the prairie was covered with grass from she said 3 feet.
Do you remember what kind of grass it was, or did he say?
Well, I don't remember anything about it. I know what kind it was, because I worked in the grass business for quite a while.
All right, what kind was it, Mr. Kerr?
Blue stem,
Blue
Indian
stem.
grass,
Mm-hmm.
switchgrass, maybe, probably a bunch of annuals that wasn't much good, some weeds.
Well, this was all they had, all this tall grass and stuff down around Marshall?
No, it was all over the country.
Did they cut it and bale it? Not bale it, but stack it or anything like that? Or just...
They were just on the road at the time they were talking about this grass,
Oh, uh-huh.
on the trails. And she said they was always scared to death of a prairie fire.
Yeah.
There wasn't no place to go. See?
Now, when your parents came from Missouri to Oklahoma, were there any towns along the way where they could stop and get some supplies or get the wagons repaired?
Yeah, there was towns, of course.
Do you happen to know any? Do you recall any that they might have mentioned?
Well, they went to Perry, Oklahoma. I remember that one because when they was coming down the road, when they tried to cross Black Bear Creek, that's out north of Perry, and they probably came along Ponca City or Newkirk, somewhere along in there. Probably Arkansas City. I don't know whether that's in the line between there and Missouri or not. I really don't know.
Well, it is.
Anyhow, they got right out in the middle of this creek. There wasn't no bridges or nothing, of course. It's just a trail across there where they'd been crossing, fording the creek. And they had their wagon loaded, they had their horses wasn't too good. They had an old cow tied on the back of the thing. They got stuck, and the horses couldn't pull them out. And the water was right up in the bottom of the wagon, see?
Getting all their furniture and supplies.
Yeah, and
Pretty
my
well.
mother, said she was really scared. They didn't know what they were going to do. They thought they were going to have to throw a bunch of the stuff out of the wagon, ruin it in order to get out. She said about this time, there was a big old guy coming in a wagon, and he didn't have nothing in it. He was just sitting up there on the seat, like a wagon seat. He had a big mustache and a big hat, and kind of a cowboy-looking guy. And he had a team of great big mules, nice harness, and everything. He was like a rich guy.
A rich man with a mule.
Yeah. So he just then drove up there and looked, and he didn't say a word. He just pulled out around and went right on up on the road on the other side. He thought, well, that man's just going off and leave us here. That's all he stood. But he stopped up there and stopped his team, and he got out, and he had a chain in his wagon, some reason or other. So he backed up there and hooked the chain onto his wagon and on that ring, and then it was tongue.
Mm-hmm. With the two, what they call
For
them?
the
Single.
tree here. Said, just hard, get up, and away his boy just yanked him right out of there. Said,
Was this a regular ford on the river that they kind of
there was
missed?
no river, this is just
It's a creek.
creek. Well, it must have been a trail,
Mm-hmm.
regular trail between someplace and Perry. But this guy, he never said a darn thing. They didn't even know his name or nothing. He just unhooked the chain and away he went.
Maybe he couldn't talk.
Well, he could talk. Because later on, I had a brother that had a business in Perry, Oklahoma. And my dad went over there to visit him. And darn, he didn't run onto this fella. And his name was Christoph. Charlie Christoph.
How do you spell that last name, please?
K-R-I-S-T-O-F-F, I think. And he run, him and his, some of his relations run a furniture store there in a Garrity, you know, what is a funeral home.
Mm-hmm.
And him and my dad, every time we go there, they'd get together and just laugh about how he saved them from drowning.
He could have got them both ways. He could sell them the furniture or he could sell them a casket. Do you remember, or did they say what kind of a team they were using? Were they using 2 or 4 horses or mules?
Just two, that's all.
2 mules
Two
or
horses.
2 horses?
This other guy had a big mule team,
Mm-hmm.
Christoph. But anyhow, they made it on down to their farm, and that's where I was born, and we lived there for about 7 or 8 years old.
You say farm, what is it, 160?
Yeah.
And they were proving it up, or had it already been proved?
They traded for it. It's
Okay.
already there. They traded this place in Missouri.
You remember what kind of a house was on it?
Well, it's the one that had part frame house and part sod.
Okay.
The sod house was built kind of down against the hill, and the wall was the west side of the kitchen in one room was built like, you know, into the wall, kind of come down like this.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is where the sod was out there on that, and then the other part was made out of wood.
And then it had a wood roof
Both of them had a wood roof.
and not any, no corrugated iron on the roof, but just
No.
wood. Okay, now, we're going to go back here a minute, Mr. Kerr. When we're talking about 2 different dugouts now. We're talking one
Yeah.
in western Kansas, and we're talking this one. The one in western Kansas was a complete dugout. I mean, a sod house.
No, I think it's part wood.
It was? Well, you can just have to remember that
Yeah, I
because
don't
you weren't
remember.
there.
Well, I've seen the darn house, see, but I was in 26, and I wasn't much interested in the house.
Mhm. And now, when you got down on this farm, did it have a well on it, or was it
No.
spring supplying water?
We had a spring. That was another good thing about that farm in Oklahoma there, down there in Logan County, Martha. You had a good spring down there about, a quarter of a mile or so from where the house was. Furnished, there's a kind of ledge of rock there, and it had a big pool there. We used to go down there and bathe in it.
So the spring was big enough to get into?
What is it? The spring had a pool.
Oh.
And it was kind of attached to a drain that come out of the field, and when it rained, the water would run over this and there's a layer of rock there, see. And this water pool there, and it dug a big kind of round pool about 30, 40 feet round, and probably 3, 4 feet.
What was it, kind of dirt bottom?
Well, it was all
It got good muddy when you went swimming in it.
Well, not too muddy.
Now, the spring itself was continual. It never did run dry.
No, it come out in rocks there, in rocks. It never was very much of a gushing spring, but there's always water there.
Now, when you got your farm going down there, was it already fenced, or did you have to fence it?
Yeah, it was fenced. We had a part
With the outbuildings, you had barns and...
barn, part of the barn was made out of poles.
Mhm.
Poles and cut off. We had a creek called a branch down in there, had trees on it. And they covered the poles of the barn with straw. Like fresh.
On all sides, or just on the north and the west?
Just on the north and the sides, and the one end was open.
Uh-huh. And on that, on the roof, What, did you have lumber on the roof, or did you have straw on the roof?
All straw, and them poles about comes off.
About 2 or 3 inch poles.
Yeah.
Now, if I remember rightly down in there, there was quite a bit of cedar. Is that what you were using?
No, wasn't much cedar there where we were.
Yeah, that's right. You were just using cottonwood or
Cottonwood and willow, and just anything, hackberry, anything you could get.
anything that you could get. But you also had enough wood so you can have a fire and keep warm.
That there was one of the big jobs.
You cut wood all summer and burn it all winter.
If there wasn't anything to do while we cut wood, well, I cut more wood than you ever saw.
You weren't getting $35 a rick for it either, were you?
No.
Now, when you got on your farm, what did you do down there? Did you raise crops on it, or was it kind of a bottomland, or what?
No, it was upland, but there's what you call a pretty fair farm. They raised wheat and oats and corn. My mother always had a big garden. This garden was always up above where the spring was. Kind of
a little draw in there.
Good soil in there.
Now, did you raise any cotton?
No, we never raised cotton. There wasn't nobody raising cotton there then.
But it did come into cotton after a while.
Came into cotton about, probably 15 or 16 or 17 or something. There was 2 cotton gins in Marshall.
Well, let's see, the Santa Fe Railroad went through there, didn't it?
Yeah, when we first, I can remember going to town, the railroad wasn't there. It was just coming through. They were building the fields and the cuts in the fields. I can remember seeing a construction crew putting in a field. There must have been 40 or 50 teams. And then some other teams was plowing the dirt. And he had these Fresnos on the back of wheels. I think we call them 3-wheel or 2-wheel Fresno or something. And them things just like ants. Them teams they wouldn't go fast, but they never did stop.
Were they mules or horses?
Oh, mules, horses, and
anything.
Kinds of things.
Actually, what happened, you say they plowed the ground first to soften it.
Yeah,
Then they took the Fresnos, the wheel Fresnos after them.
Because they could pick up the loose dirt. Otherwise, they couldn't pull it.
And I see what they were doing. One team of horses would go by and get a load, and there'd be another one coming right behind them.
Yeah,
and they just go around in a circle.
Round. They drive up on the field and empty it and go in this one.
Did they ever have to double up their mules? Would they get so much of a load sometimes that the 2 mules couldn't handle it?
No, they just the thing would just hold so much. It was kind of a thing built up, kind of little sides on it, and a little scoop, just kind of like a shovel.
Yeah. Would it be the same thing as about as a tumblebug or something else?
No, it's tumblebug, kind of like a tumblebug only.
It had wheels on it.
Wheels and bigger. When it got full, you had a big lever back there on the back. And raised it up, and you just rolled on the wheel. And when you got to dump it, like you throwed that thing over, and the dump spread it out.
You don't remember how many men? Would you say 500 men or 1,000 men?
I wouldn't know. There's a lot of horses there. Must have been.
Did they have a construction camp right there?
Sure.
And the steam engines, boy, we got an engine coming through town. You don't hear them. No passenger stop here, do they anymore? This is at Geary.
They don't have any passengers.
They don't? Amtrak doesn't come through here.
No.
What is this, the Frisco that runs through this town, or Rock Island? Rock Island? It's nice to hear a train, but I used to rather hear the steam engine whistle, didn't you?
Yeah.
And when they were building that railroad in there, were the engines right behind?
Oh, I've never seen any engines.
Oh, you did. Did they ever get that railroad in operation?
That's genetic. It's still there.
Is that the one that goes to Shawnee?
No, it goes to Enid.
Oh, okay. I just will find.
It comes out of Guthrie, it goes through Crescent and Level.
Oh, I see. It goes north.
Douglas, Fairmont, Enid, and they used to call the Denver, Enid, and Gulf, or some D and G.
Well, it's all Santa Fe
It goes
now.
on up in Kiowa, Kansas, I think, where stop.
It comes into several, it crosses several of the Santa Fe lines up in there, and they also have a whole bunch of other lines, but that's a little off of it. Now, when you made your crops down there, what equipment did you have? Did you have mules and sulkies or plows or what?
We had plows. First we had walking plow, and then they got, later on they got a sulky plow that had seat on it.
Mm-hmm.
Pulled it with 3 horses and sit on there in one spur.
Uh-huh. Did you used to drive the horses, Mr. Kerr?
No, I never plowed, but I used to harrow. I wasn't big enough to.
And a harrow, was it a sulky, or did you have to walk behind it in the dust?
The harrow, of course, you had to walk behind it.
It was dusty too, wasn't it?
Well, the ground was very moist and barefooted, and I really enjoyed walking in that.
You never stepped on a snake or anything like that, did you?
No, there wasn't much snakes there.
Then when you got your land ready, what would you plant? What kind of, when you made your crop, your wheat, your head feed or whatever, how did you harvest it? Did you have a steam thrasher come in there, or?
We had the binder. We got out there and cut the wheat with a binder and shop it. Put it in the shop.
Mm-hmm.
We had to shop it, and 10 or 15 shocks in a bundle in the shop. And they sat there, and the people there had commercial thrashing machines, the Dietrich boys. And
Dietrich?
Dietrich. And the Kerson boys, Kerson. And grandparents had a thrashing machine. Their name was Rutherford.
What's that name?
Rutherford.
Rutherford?
Yeah.
Okay, now these thrashing machines that you were talking about, were they operated by steam engines?
Oh, you did.
What was that, the big case, or do you remember?
Case, Northwestern, let's see. Rumley was later. I think it was.
Did you say the runway, R-U-N-W-A-Y?
R-U-M-L-E-Y.
Oh, runway. Oh, yeah, I'm familiar with that one. And what were you on these things, the water boy or the bundle boy?
That's just the time. Remember, I moved to town when I was 8 years old.
Oh, well, you weren't in on that.
This is just what I've seen there when I was a kid. Of course, it happened every year all the time around there. There was the same thing, so they got these combines.
How did they get these steam engines to run the thrashers from field to field?
Well, they just run them. It's like they with a wagon or a team.
They were so big, though, they couldn't go over heavy. They couldn't go over the bridges.
Well, sometimes you had to go around the bridges, or they put planks. They plank them.
Mm-hmm.
Put a bunch of big heavy planks on there.
Do you remember on these steam engines, what did they do? Did they have wheels about 12 inches, flat wheels about 12 inches wide, and have cleats on them, or? You remember that? You're grinning like you do.
They had wheels all different widths according to the size of the engine.
Oh, they'd be 12 to 18 inches.
And these wheels, some of course are bigger. Some of them was all 10, 12 feet high. Some of them was 9, and just according to how big the engine it was.
Well, do you have any idea what the horsepower was? 10, 12 horsepower or something like that?
Probably more than that. They had plenty of horsepower, I know that.
They were just, you couldn't put pitch bundles fast enough to slow them down.
The only thing you could do is you slug the separators. You throw bundles in the wrong end too and crosswise.
But if you did it right, you couldn't beat them.
But the engine never stopped.
When the separators were working, the steam engines were working, they were using wood or coal.
Oh, this is wood, and I mean coal.
Coal, okay. Did they ever make any sparks to set the fields apart?
Well, whether they set the fields apart, most of them had a kind of a screen over the end of the smokestack.
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't catch the spark.
You didn't ever get any pictures of those things, did you?
Oh, well, there's probably lots of pictures. I never did take any pictures of them. But there's pictures in every place of them.
Yeah. I've only seen one of them working, and it looked like it. I saw it out in the field working, and it looked like it had a belt about 150 feet long,
yeah.
and it crossed.
Yeah.
And it was just slapping, every time when it would cross. Now,
when you talking about loading these things up, they they crashed over here in Bill's, John Smith's place, and then they come to you, and they just went from one field. A lot of times they just take the steeples out of the fence and let the fence down, and they didn't move over a quarter of a mile.
Were you ever at, when they were thrashing, were you ever at one of the dinners that those housewives used to serve?
Yeah.
Can you remember them?
Oh, boy. At that particular time, most of the thrashing machines didn't eat at the farmhouses. They had a cook shack with them. They had a cook and cooker's helper, and they eat at the cook shack. I went to the thrashing machine for several years, picked bundles in the field and slept in under the cook shack and around the straw piles. Anyway, they had an engineer run up there to the separator. They'd always sent it where the way the wind was.
Yeah.
And then, of course, where the farmer wanted the straw pile. And he'd run up there and set that separator up there where it was and unhook it. Just make a big, if he was a good engineer, he'd just run out there like that, and he'd back up this way and run up that way, and boy, you'd be right in line.
You mean he'd make a circle around the straw sack and then back?
No, there was no straw sack.
Where it was going to be?
Yeah, the straw sack, the separator would be here, and here's where the farmer wanted the straw pile. Well, the engine would be fastened to the front of the separator with a ton, and when he anyway, with the engineer, he in order to line his big bell wheel on the engine up with the bell wheel on the separator, he was always on the right side. He'd be facing away from the separator. He'd just run up here like this, you see, circle, and he'd turn his wheels, he'd back up that way, and then he'd line up that pulley. Guy at the separator man, and wanted to do the picture, would have the belt strung out there, and they strapped the belt up on the engine.
They had a pretty good sized wheel that belt went on in the engine. What was it, 3 or 4 feet or something like that?
Yeah, probably
About 4 feet.
Not so wide. And he'd back up, and as he'd back, he'd get out there and slide along that wheel, you know, and I'd run the engine and line it up myself.
And then what happened when it rained? Did it get bogged down?
Well, they didn't do nothing when it rained.
They just went off to town and played.
They had to go spend your wages.
Now, when the steam engine was operating, it took a lot of water. How did they get the water there?
Well, they had a water tank and a water hauler. Later on, I worked for a guy that had 2 thrashing machines.
The steam engines?
Well, yeah, double simple reeds, and the other was a Northwestern, old return flute engine. And that old double simple, I run it.
What do you call it? Double what?
Double simple.
Double simple?
Yeah, the cylinder had 2 cylinders, one on each side. See, the simple cylinders, a lot of them other engines had it. Double cylinders, but they were compound.
Mm-hmm.
And but this double simple, when it chugged just like a 4-cylinder car. It goes, took it. And I was so.
Now, let me get this straight on this compound. They used the steam twice? Is that what?
Yeah, the compound used the steam twice. One was the main little cylinder, and the other one was about twice as big.
And they used the exhaust steam.
Yeah.
Anyway, how about the wheat going, the straw going to the stack? Did it make you itch?
Well, it did. Well, you didn't pay attention to it.
Did you ever work broom corn?
No, they never raised any blue corn.
Okay, and then you finally went to town, and whether you liked it or not, you're in town. Then you went to work for wages, probably.
Yeah. Well, my dad, when he moved down there, he had what they called a dray line. At that time, they had the railroad and everything in there.
In Marshall?
In Marshall. And everything come into the railroad on cars, box cars, and all kinds of cars. Had to haul them uptown with the dray wagon. My dad, he bought out the dray line and put two of my brothers to run the drain line. He always kept us pretty busy, see.
Was it just the wagons that would be used to haul the produce, were they covered or were they open?
No, they had stake slats and stuff on
They
them.
could take the stakes off if they wanted to haul a bigger load.
Yeah.
What was he using, 2 mules to pull them?
Horses,
2 horses?
yeah.
I always get it confused. I figure mules are just about as basic as you can get.
Yeah, well, they're kind of, horses is more stable and gentle around town, around railroads and things like that. You had them big old horses with their big feet and they just,
Furtrins
well,
or Clydesdales?
they're just probably a mixture of both, but they're big horses with big feet.
Uh-huh.
They wasn't full blood or anything, just a common run of a country horse.
You know, you can't get a big horseshoe anymore. All you can do is get the little pointy things.
Yeah, probably.
And then you were working on a dray wagon then for a while.
Well, I used to, he had a shed along the railroad and run an ice house.
Did he make his own ice or did he cut the ice off the river?
There wasn't no river around there.
Uh-huh.
He hauled the ice from Gusty. They had a ice plant in Gusty.
Do you know the name of that plant by any chance?
No, I don't.
Let's see, now let me go back to this and ask you this question. What is the date on this thing about what you were talking about when you were working on the dray wagon in Marshall?
Probably 1914 and 15.
Well, the reason why I was asking you this, Mr. Kerr, in about 1900, they built a railroad east of Guthrie that went along the Cimarron. It was the Santa Fe. You remember that line? I was wondering if that's where the ice, how he got the ice. But he would drive his wagon into Guthrie?
You never could buy any, get enough ice there, and nobody cut any ice off.
No, that's what I mean. When he was getting the ice out of Guthrie, he would take his wagon into Guthrie?
No, they hauled it up on the train.
Oh, that's what I mean. It probably came out of that line that went along the Cimarron River
Yeah.
into Stillwater.
No, it didn't go anywhere near Stillwater. It went up to Crescent. Went from Gusty out kind of that way, up to Crescent and Level. Didn't go anywhere, didn't even go to Stillwater. Stillwater was north.
Oh, I see.
And this, you had to go kind of northwest to get, it was 16 miles, I think, from Gusty or something like that to Crescent.
Marshall is about 16 miles from Guthrie.
No. Crescent is the first stop.
Mm-hmm.
They had, and then Level was about 8 or 9 miles, and then it was 6, 7 miles from there to Marshall.
Okay.
It's 30 miles from Gusty to Marshall approximately.
And they'd ship it up by...
They had refrigerated cars just like they got nowadays.
Do you happen to remember what 100 pounds of ice was selling for at that time?
Oh, I think about 30 cents. Yeah, one of my brothers used to have to take the ice, and we had a horse and a spring wagon, and we delivered ice to all the people around town.
They would put a sign up in the window and say they want some ice.
They'd have a sign ice, and we'd stop there. And
The sign would say we want ice, and it'd also say how many pounds they wanted.
well, sometimes we had to go and ask them.
Uh-huh. And all the kids would come around after the wagon to pick up the pieces of ice and eat them.
Yeah, they also had these bunkers along the railroad. They hauled in crushed rock. I don't know where it come from. When they built it, used to make concrete, also sand. And the railroad and the sacks of cement, they used to come in 100-pound sacks.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. They had the island load of many of them. And they also had a coal bunker. And you had to ship the coal in. I remember it come from McAllister.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Have to unload that car into the bunkers.
You say that you had a coal bunker. You got it from McAllister up there. They were doing quite a bit of mining down that area then. And then you had this insulated ice house where you kept your ice. But you went into town there and worked with your father and stayed there for a while. And we might go somewhat quickly through here.
we still lived on the farm. I went to school, I think a couple of years, at a union schoolhouse out of the country school. We had to walk a mile and a half to school.
Well, you were halfway between two schools then, weren't you?
Just about. And, of course, we had to take our lunch and everything. So all the kids walked to school. And when we moved to town, well, of course, they had a school at Marshall, of course, because they did have a high school. They called it Marshall High School.
Do you remember the town of Jefferson up there?
No.
That was somewhere in that area. Anyway, you went through, did you go through high school or just get through?
I went to 9th grade.
That was the beginning of high school, wasn't it?
And the first year afterwards. I went to school and up to went to the 8th grade. That's when you had to take a county examination, remember? So I figured I was smart enough. I forget how old I was.
But you're old enough to be smart.
Yeah. I think 16 or something like that. That's when I was picking bundles and tractor machines in summertime and plowing and all sorts of working for the farmers and helping my dad with his. Well, he finally sold that gray line. He got kind of old.
Well, did he, by the time he sold the dray line, were trucks coming in there to take it over?
No, there wasn't no trucks
That's
for
it,
a long
okay.
time after that. But anyway, getting back to this school, I had a brother who worked at the roundhouse, Kansas City, for the Sandy Railroad. And I'd been working in, one of my brothers had a garage there in Marshall.
The automobiles had come into there by now.
Automobiles were there, but the trucks wasn't much, you know, the old Model T Fords.
Uh-huh.
And that's about the same time right in there, I worked for this company called Hyden and Simke.
H-Y-D-E-N?
H-I-D-E-N, I think it
And
was Y-D-E-N, S-E-M-K-E, I think.
Oh.
It's on this thing here.
Oh, okay.
And there were the guys that had two thrashing machines. And they had a meat market, and a grocery store, and a moving picture store.
You remember the movie picture? It was a silent picture, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Wasn't it a, didn't it?
I run the damn picture show at night.
Wasn't it called a Magic Lantern or something like that at that time?
You had it sitting up there on a table like this, and you had to turn it by hand.
You had to crank it by hand, and if you cranked it faster, the people would move faster.
Yeah. You had to crank it so.
And
What keep the arc working right so the picture would be clear.
oh, it was an arc light that you were using?
Yeah, we had a motor, gasoline engine, and a generator. See, they didn't have electricity.
Yeah. And now, do you remember any of the films? Any of the names of the films that they had?
The only one I can think of is something about Mary Pickford. Who of them?
Gloria Swanson, Mary Pickford?
Mary, I think the thing, they had one that showed every week. Everybody that was a big drawing card. I think the theme song or whatever was Who Will Marry Mary. I believe that was the name of it.
Oh, Mary Mary is the name of the picture?
Yeah, Who Will Marry Mary.
Oh.
She had a bunch of fellas chasing after, you know, when she was playing hard to get and all this. It was a serial. They just kept running every week.
Oh, the guys never did get tired. They kept on running all the time.
First one, then another.
And in addition to the serial, you usually had another picture too?
Well,
Or was it just the serial?
I forget how many reels it had, 3 or 4 reels that you had to run through, and of course when you'd get through with them, you had to rewind them.
And what were you then for description? Did they have lettering on the film?
Well, they had the words on the film.
Yes, it was supposed to be what they were saying.
Supposed to say.
They may not be saying what they were supposed to be saying. Did they have a piano or a music or something?
Piano, and this gal sat up there, her name was, she could really make that piano play.
And was she playing?
Her name was Logan.
How was that spelled, please?
Geary, I forget her first name.
And did she live in town?
Oh, yeah.
Was she a piano teacher?
Well, I think so. Young girl.
Uh-huh.
Nina Logue, that was her name.
What's that?
Nina Logue.
Loge?
Logue.
Oh. And when the thing got more exciting, the piano played faster. And did you ever speed up the film and run faster?
The films run just about fast.
You couldn't make them run any faster.
Yeah, you could make it run as fast. You line too fast, well, the people would go to, you need a raspberry.
And what was it? Where was it conducted? In a store or was it a community center?
It was in a hall. It had a hall there. The building belonged to my future daddy-in-law, who was belonged to. He moved in from the country and built a brick building there. Had a store in the bottom and had upstairs. It had a hall upstairs. That's where they had the picture show.
Did they call it an opera house?
No, it was just a picture show.
Uh-huh.
You had to go up the steps. The steps were on the outside of the building, iron steps.
How much was the admission?
Oh, 25 or 30 cents.
Was it that high? I didn't think it would be that high. I was thinking a nickel or dime or something like that. But how long did they last? I mean, each program?
Oh, probably something like an hour, something like that.
An hour, and it was once a week on Saturday night?
I wasn't on Saturday night, I think it was on Friday night or something.
And did they sell popcorn and candy? And
Well, I think they did have some kids, but I was always up above there running the machine. They was all down below. See the picture shot down like this on the screen.
Did you tape or your film ever break on you? What did you do then?
Break and you was in trouble.
You had to get a coal oil lamp?
You had to glue it back together. It didn't take very long though.
Every time you glued it, your film got a little bit shorter.
Well, there's always a whole bunch of pictures, you see, in sequence. That's what made it move. It didn't make much difference if you put out one or two pictures.
Do you remember who produced the movies? Was it Warner Brothers or?
Well, probably, I don't know who it was, but anyway, we got them, I think, they come in on the train.
You don't know where they were sent, where somebody sent them?
They ordered them, of course, from Oklahoma. I think they came from Oklahoma City.
Well, they used to have a pretty good film center down in Oklahoma City. And the people were always looking forward to their Friday night movies.
There'd always be a big crowd.
What are you talking about, a big crowd? 50 people? 100 people?
50, 75, or 100. Had these folding chairs, you know. Had to stack them up, hold them up and set them on the wall and freak the place out, and everything would reset them.
And besides using that hall for pictures, you probably use it for a lot of other, like the Masons or...
Well, the Masons had a hall of their own.
They did.
I think the Oddfellows used it part of the time.
Is that building still out there?
Yeah.
It's in
I
Marshall.
think it is. I haven't been to Marshall. Well, we got some children buried there, and our folks is buried there. And cemetery at Marshall, we go up there every year at Decoration Day. And I don't think I went down through town this time. But the building, the last time I was there, it's still there just like it always was.
You say it's a brick building, and there was a store down below.
It had a basement under it, too.
Uh-huh. And out there...
They used to have a skating rink in the basement.
Roller skating rink?
Yeah, cement. Oh.
That was a noisy spot, wasn't it? And what did you do? Did you have music, the piano player down there, or you just skated?
Just skated.
Did you roller skate?
Well, some, of course, naturally.
You got in a lot of activities, and right now, you're chomping at the bit. You'd rather not be here. You'd like to be out in the field and playing golf. Well, barnyard pool.
I guess I could miss one day, but
Oh.
Still lots of time yet.
Oh, isn't it?
Anyway, getting back to going to school, my brother in this garage business, I learned, in them days you had to make some of your auto parts, like bushings and bolts for the steering gear and different things. They had lathes and grinders and boring machines and things. And I learned to run all them things, see, and I liked to be a machinist. And my brother said, well, you come up here to Arkansas City when you get out of 8th grade. He says, I'll get you a job up here in the roundhouse as apprentice machinist for the Santa Fe Railroad. He had some kind of a foreman's job up there. So I went after I got out of 8th grade, and I went up there, and sure enough, I got on as apprentice machinist. Santa Fe Railroad in the roundhouse. And of course, they started in on working on the front end on them doors. Them doors leak while I blow the fire out. See?
You mean those doors where they crawl into the engine?
Up on the front end.
Yeah.
The headlight is.
Mm-hmm.
And they had me working on the yang took the fire out of the engine when they come in off the run.
Uh-huh.
That's the call in the hot thing or something. Fire. Then I was a fire builder. And also
You mean a fire builder? You build the fire back in the locomotive after it was...
Then I helped wash the boilers.
Did you ever have to go inside of them and clean out the boilers?
No.
That was a pretty hot job in there.
Couldn't get in them.
Well, when somebody had to go in there once in a while.
No, they didn't.
How did they take the scale off and things like that?
Well, they used compound in the water.
Okay.
There wasn't no way to get in them boilers.
I was thinking that the door up in the front, you could open it.
No, that's the door up in front. The compartment about that wide, and there's a bulkhead in there, and that's where the flues, they had, probably 75 or 100 flues running through back into the firebox, and the water was all around them flues in the bowl, and that hot air from the fire went through these flues, helped the water. And the smoke, of course, went out through the flues, and the hot went out through the exhaust. The engine was fastened in there with a pipe, so it would blow up this chimney and make a suction, the draft.
Every time the piston moved, it...
make that puff of smoke out of the exhaust.
And then as it got going faster, the exhaust would be faster.
Yeah. Anyway, that front end door leaked, well, you see what had happened. The engine running through the air. Well, man, it was darn lose the steam. Couldn't keep up steam. But anyhow, it wasn't much way for it to leak. But fire building, up there they had division that went south used oil. Burned oil in their engines. The ones that went north used coal and west. And had them great big old freight engines, see, there's the whoppers. And it took a ton of coal to cover the grates on the way you build a fire in there. These guys that did the hot crew, they'd go work and clean them grates all out and all them ashes and all that stuff, and they'd all clean to run the darn thing in. They'd have to run them engines in there after they take the fire out. The steam in the boiler would run the engine into the roundhouse. Well, I went up there and worked in this roundhouse and learned quite a bit about it before you had to learn the parts of the engine and all this stuff. See, that's the reason they had me working. And I'd worked in my brother's garage down there at Marshall, and he didn't want me to go in the first place. So he came up there and we went out that roundhouse, and it was a smoky darn place, see, and all them old coal engines. Some of them was so long in the wintertime to run the engine in and shut the door, so it would be so cold. Now they had a big funnel where the smokestack was, see. Just run the smokestack come out from under them funnels, and the darn place was just so full of smoke you couldn't hardly see your hands in front of you. So he said, well, this kind of job's going to kill you if you stay at this, because I want you to come back and we'll have to run the garage. So I didn't. There was a foreman up there by the name of Murphy. He was a hot-headed Irishman, you know, and that's when he was a superintendent he was. And I went in and told him I was going to quit. The boy said, we broke every regulation in this place getting you in here, and he says, you ain't never going to mount to a down. He said, you're going to stay in the job better than this. So, I didn't have much to say to Mr. Murphy.
When you had the engines in the roundhouse, repairing them, did they ever when you parked them at night, did they ever pick up steam, generate their own steam and go through the walls?
And they brought them in the roundhouse. I told you a while ago, they took the fire out of them and run them in there with the steam in the boiler. And they had some big chains, about a big length of chains about that long.
About 3 feet long.
Yeah, that you took and stuck them in between the wheels. And they couldn't get up enough power to pull themselves over on them blocks. But the only way they could do it, see, when you're a fire builder, why, that's what I was for the time. You take a shovel and you take the coal out of the tinder and you spray it swing it all around inside the fire box so you cover the grate with coal. Then you had a thing kind of like a barrel that had steam pressure on it and full of oil. It had a hose and a torch. It was like kind of like a torch, that's what it was. And you turn that thing on and that steam and makes that, and you light that with a throw a chunk of waste down in the fire box. Turn that thing in there and it catch fire and just whirl it around and around like that. If you got that coal fire, that torch, it'd take made a heck of a fire. You had that outside source of steam and pipe that you hooked onto a blower up along the side of the engine, the pipe, they called the blower, and then turn it on and make it draft to the suction, see, the suction fire through there. It wouldn't take too long. Now, the thing that you had to watch all the time with those engines was to be sure that the blower was full of water.
Yeah.
You had a water glass, of course. That's the first thing you looked at, to see where the water level was. It ought to be about half full of the glass. And you shut the throttle. You put the Johnson bar, they call it, neutral in the middle.
Which way does the Johnson bar? When you push it ahead, does that make the engine move ahead? When you pull it back, does that reverse?
I think so. I never did.
I was thinking that's the way it went. No.
But anyhow, the throttle, you have to be dang sure that the throttle was shut. That was the main thing. That'd be the only way. There was instances, like you say, of the engine getting away. Some sort of fired up. Like you say, of the engine getting away. Some sort of fired up at the darn throttle.
I've seen pictures of an engine through the side of a roundhouse.
Yeah. That's the only way it has been possible. But anyway, that done my railroad enough then. When I went back to work in the garage, then I decided to go back to school, and go to high school. And about that time, I'd been going to school, let's see, it was in 2/12 of the year, that'd been January, February, that'd be March. About that time when the war started, I was in the 9th grade, going to school, and some of the boys, when they declared war on Germany, some of my buddies that played football and baseball and stuff, school said, we're going to join the army, so you going with us? There's about 5 or 6 of them, see, all about my size and age.
About how old were you then, Mr. Kerr? About 16?
No, I was about nearly 18.
Oh.
And
You beat your father. You stayed without war for a little longer than he did.
I went and propositioned my mother. She was my boss, more or less. Whenever I needed licking, well, the old man gave it to me.
You never did need one, did you?
She'd tell my mother, tell that boy needs a whipping. I'd get her too, don't believe I would.
What did you use, a hang strap or a trace?
Screwdriver switch. Anyhow, I told my mother the boys was gonna, Casey Jones was one of them, and one of them named Diedrich, one of them Diedrich boys.
Were they all merchants, sons of merchants in
Yeah,
town?
there's farmers and
Uh-huh.
merchants and all around the town, around the country. She says, I just see her, you're not gonna join the army, because you're not old enough, and I won't sign your papers. That settled it.
You said, well, my father did.
Yeah, so it went on there for, not too long, 2 or 3 weeks or so, and these other boys went on, see, they went and joined, sure enough. And so we went on there 2 or 3 weeks or a month, and so I made so dang miserable, moping around there, and carrying on.
Boy, did you ever have a campaign.
My mother, she finally said, well, if you want to go and get killed, just go on. So, by that time I was 18, it must have been a couple of months anyway. So, my brother that run the garage, he was against it too. But anyway, me and him went to Oklahoma City on the train. I enlisted. But getting back.
Where was the enlistment? Was it in the federal building in Oklahoma City, or do you
I
remember?
don't know where it was. Up to some recruiting office
Uh-huh.
upstairs. I remember that.
Yeah, it probably was in federal building at 3rd or 4th Street.
And, I remember, I figured that I'd enlist there, you see, and I'd catch up with these other boys. And lo and behold, I never seen none of them, never even come close to them.
Do you remember when you were in Oklahoma City in 1916, 17 in there? Can you remember anything about Oklahoma City, or were you long enough there that you had an impression?
Well, the only thing I can know about it is just a lot of people, and of course they had streetcars, and one thing and another, they had a streetcar line from Guthrie to Oklahoma City.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we used to drive to Guthrie before, when they were growing up, and take the streetcar to Oklahoma City to picture show or something, and had a little extra spending money.
You would drive from Oklahoma City in a car or something? Or?
We drive from Marshall to Guthrie.
Oh, I see.
And then we get on the interurban, and it would go to, well, you could drive on where it didn't cost you 50, 75 cents, I suggest it. But you go down there and on the interurban, a lot better than you could drive a car, see.
Yeah, and did the interurbans go often enough that you wouldn't have any trouble? Did they run all day and night?
It didn't bother us any, I know that. Going or coming.
Uh-huh.
Probably have to wait once in a while, a little while, or something. Anyway, how come to join the Signal Corps? I started to tell you a while ago. When I was a kid, these old soldiers would get together and talk, and there's one guy that used to come in and talk to my dad there.
Wait a minute, you're talking about soldiers from the Civil War now.
Well, my dad was, but this soldier had served in the army afterwards and served 30 years and retired from the army. That was long about, a little while before this war. They were talking about this war with Germany then. And I told him that I was wanting to join the army, and my mother wouldn't let me, and so forth. And so he said that if I joined the army, he said that he was in the Signal Corps, see. So he said, that's the place, that's what you want to join, the Signal Corps. He said, that's the best branch there is in the army. And so that's the reason I joined the Signal Corps. He said they've got trucks and stuff that you'll be interested in. He said you won't have to do so much drilling and going on like they do in the infantry and stuff. But he didn't tell me that they'd be right out. Right in front of me.
Do you remember what your chores or your work was? And there you go, blowing the place up. Somebody's trying to take flashes in here. Anyway, can you remember what your chores were in the Signal Corps? Well, first of all...
That is more to it, that's just the start now.
Oh.
So I got into the Signal Corps, see. Well, they sent me to Fort Logan, Colorado. And, that's where I took the oath of allegiance and all that. Got my uniform and got acquainted with the Army a little bit. And they give you a questionnaire, see. Fill out a thing about that long and had a bunch of questions.
About a foot long,
what you've done and what you've been all your life and your education and all this and that. So, and all this stuff, during this time I'd learned to weld and I'd learned to do all this and I'd worked on gasoline motors and all that kind of stuff. And that was the beginning of the Air Force. So I wound up in the aviation section of the Signal Corps.
Did they have planes up in your field?
They didn't have nothing.
But you were still studying aviation.
Yeah, that's right. But while we was in Fort Logan, we learned the infantry drill. We was up there a couple of weeks. We got up there and drilled, and they give us some shots, first one then another, you know, and hit us up with our clothes. They told us every day to look on that bulletin board. What's that? Every time you go by there, I look on there and see if you see your name. That is one of the things. So I went by there, going somewhere, and there's my name up there. It'll be at such and such a place with my duffel bag. They give you a thing kind of like made out of blue denim, about like a gunny sack, and you carried your clothes in it. So you had a rope noose on it that you tightened it up to your duffel bag and be down at this certain spot a certain time in the morning, and you're headed for San Antonio, Texas.
What time of the year was this? Winter time?
It was in March, and about probably the last of March.
It was getting pretty mild up in Colorado.
It was cold.
It was.
And so we got on this train, and boy, they railroaded us. That train never stopped nothing but water and cold. And then right through them towns and everything, never even slowed down.
Did they change? They probably changed the engines.
Well, like I say, they had to stop and get. I don't think they even changed engines. So they didn't take them long to put on water and coal. They just dumped stuff in there, you know. Anyway, we wound up down in San Antonio, Texas, about 11 o'clock in the night. And there was about 6 or 7 coaches altogether at the time we got them all hooked on there. And that was the beginning of Camp Kelly, Texas. We had with shovels and picks and built ditches and laid out foundations and built barracks, and we lived in camps. See, that night, when we got off of the darn train, they loaded up some trucks and they took us away out there in the country in a darn mesquite brush patch, and there wasn't a thing out there, no place, just the ground and then freeze. They'd give us a cot, and we had one little old blanket, and I'm telling you, it was colder than the thunder. I like to froze to death, and we did have overcoats. So we finally put a couple of cots close together, and they put the 2 blankets on the bottom and tried to cover up with their overcoats, and we finally kept them freeze to death.
You didn't have any tents or anything for shelter?
No, nothing. That is that first night. But the next day, that was Camp Kerr, they called it. We was in First Company A. We was the first company there along the road, where the rest of the soldiers come marching in with their civilian clothes and stuff. They didn't even have uniforms or nothing.
They were still soldiers?
Yeah, still soldiers. And we had to have us a walking guard with the broomsticks, you know, and stuff like that. But anyhow, we was the First Company A down in Camp Hill.
Of the Signal Corps?
Signal Corps, aviation section of the Signal Corps.
He's still looking for planes?
Well, they had an air force down there, but they didn't have any planes to mount them. They had some of them old things around there that looked like bats, you know, and made out of, you know, them old-fashioned things, them wings and tail out behind, little old engine up in the middle. Darnest thing you ever saw. They did have some other more modern planes like Curtis OX-5 and some of them had a standard plane. That's the name of it, maybe a standard airplane company or something. And I think they had some Wright airplanes. But anyway, we didn't get to fool with them at all. We were too busy building ditches for sewers and water lines. There's a big artesian well there. That thing was about that big, and when we got there, the water was just shooting up out of it, about so high.
About 4 or 5 feet.
Yeah, and it was just just kind of lukewarm. It was good water, tasted good.
It wasn't sulfur or anything like that?
No, it was real good water. And so that whole darn camp used that well. We run pipes from it down to the line to different kitchens.
They ran pipes under its own pressure?
It was kind of downhill.
Oh.
Of course, when we capped the thing, of course, and fixed the pipes on it like a Christmas tree, you know, what a Christmas tree is.
A Christmas tree like in an oil field.
All these places where the different pipes fasten on. And also we built this kind of a ditch down through there where the natural what was in the water when we first got there. I just running down through there making kind of a little stream going off down to. Well, I never did know where it went to. I never did go down that far.
You had all you had to do right where you were located.
Anyway, we built slats with boards, you know, kind of like a, you know, call it kind of like a railroad cattle guard. But they had tents around there, and each company had a shower bath, and you could go down there and take a shower bath. You know.
And the water was warm enough, naturally.
It was nice. And that went on way down the line there. There's about 40 different companies down there before it got over with. And then I don't know what happened there after we left. But anyway, I come in there at noon off of one of them details, sitting there on the cot. Up to that time, it's summertime, you had the tents rolled up, you know, and tied up. It was cool. And here come a bunch of guys along there. And I looked and I said, well, that ain't my brother, it's his double. See, I was about 10 years younger than the rest of them. And so, of course, my sister, she's about 22 years older than I was, see. And something like that. Anyhow, my brother's name was Reuben. He was a baseball player and played baseball for Dallas, Texas and towns like that.
You say his name was Reuben,
R-E-U-B-E-N, Reuben P. Kerr. He's named after Pence, Reuben Pence. My mother's father, her name was Pence.
How do you spell that, please?
P-E-N-S-E. And then, so I grabbed up my mess kit, you know, and about time to eat. And we had to go walk down there to the kitchen up the head of the tent. So I just got along behind about 4 or 5 guys and just walked along there and see where the heck them guys went. Because by that time there's probably 30,000, 40,000 people there. They just camped all around there. And so they went down to the 36th Air Squadron down the line. I was back there in the background watching, you know. And he was a sergeant. He was about, I guess he was an old man. He must have been 30 or something, I don't know.
Your brother was a sergeant?
Yeah. He just enlisted, but they made him a sergeant just on account of on this train. They always put somebody in charge, you know, and they called him sergeant. So we went down there and I watched where they went, and lo and behold, while they was lined up there before they turned them loose, it's noon, and so they said, this group 8, one squad, so there's 8. They said, squad so-and-so will go up to First Company A kitchen and eat. He was in that squad. That's right away. My company, see.
Mm-hmm.
So I trailed on behind him.
He hadn't recognized yet.
Well, I don't guess he had. But anyway, when we got our grub kitchen, he went out to his seat out on it, just sat down on the ground and eat. We didn't have no tables or nothing. So I went out there about 7 or 8 feet from him, and sat down and started eating. And pretty soon, it said, "Ain't you Jimmy?" I said, "Yep."
It took him a long time, didn't it?
Yeah. So we was together there for not too long, maybe a month. And they shipped them guys over to France, and they sent us to Dayton, Ohio, the Wilbur Wright Airfield. And man, you talk about going from bad to something good. Well, they had steam heated barracks, they had tables, they had beds, and man, you couldn't believe it. They had kitchen, and you went in there and sat down at a table and had silverware and plates, just like you was at a hotel.
How about San Antonio? What kind of food did they have down there?
Oh, just regular old army junk.
SOS?
Yeah. Well, I never heard of fault with the grub they served. They didn't. Of course,
But when you got up to Ohio, the food and all was better?
Well, it was probably better prepared because they had stoves, had regular. Of course, we had cooks of our own. We run our own kitchen and everything. We had cooks. You got in the Mexican, you got on KP, and some people that are always in trouble, and finally they done just permanent KP. They couldn't do nothing else.
Did you ever get on KP for misbehaving?
Yeah.
You did your share.
I was generally trying to behave myself pretty good.
What nationality are you, Mr. Kerr? Are you Irish?
Scotch Irish. My dad.
I figured that by your disposition you might be Irish.
Scotch Irish. My dad was. My mother was part Dutch. Some of her ancestors were kind of Dutch.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, he was also English because her relation was named. What she said was that way back there when the world was little, some of their folks started to America on a boat, and they got in a storm, and they finally was blown over to Holland, and the ship was wrecked, and they seemed like they lived over there in Holland for a period of time, and somehow or other her family, some of them got mixed up with the Hollander some way.
Mm-hmm. Well, at time we'll take care of that for you.
Yeah. And then they later on made it over, got another boat, made it back, and made
They
it
picked
on,
out one this time that didn't sink or didn't get blown away.
made it over to.
Now, when you were in Dayton, was that your last camp in the United States, and then from there you went to...
We stayed up there, and we really got in the business there.
You learned your signal business?
No, we was in the Air Force.
Oh.
We didn't have nothing to do with signals. I never did have anything to do with the signals. That's the funny part.
Well, and when you were in the Air Force, were you flying a plane?
No, I was a mechanic. See, that's the reason I got into it, because I'd worked in the garage and was familiar with them days. There wasn't too many mechanics, see, and they wouldn't even let us ride in an airplane. They said,
You were too valuable.
Too valuable. We got to have you guys. We just didn't know to fly. There wasn't too many. And after the war was over, old General Patrick, when we was going to leave.
General what?
General Patrick.
P-A-T-R-I-C?
Yeah.
K?
He was the head of the Air Force.
Oh.
He got out there and made a big talk. He said, now you sort of know more about airplanes, and how to operate them and everything else than anybody. And he said, we'd like to have every one of you that's enlist and stay. Said we just enlisted for the duration of the war, see. But I had all the war airplanes I wanted.
Well, when you got through with Dayton, where did you go next?
Well, the next thing we do, we landed out on Long Island, New York, in a camp, kind of a holding camp, so we get a boat. And I guess we was out there, 3 or 4 weeks or a month or something.
About how long a time was this? Are you talking about a year from the time you enlisted until this time?
No, it wasn't about 4 or 5 months,
Oh.
like that. But I wasn't at Fort Logan very long, and we was at Dayton, Ohio, I think about 2 months and a half, something like that. That's all we done up there. We had crews, we had cadets, we were training cadets, we was taking care of the airplanes.
You were training other mechanics, is that what you were doing?
Flyers.
Oh.
We had a crew, see, we had so many ships on our crew, and we took care of them. We done just like when they fly, when they come in, well, we checked the gas and oil and whatever. The pilot made some notation about something, why we check it and clean the plugs and change the oil and just like stuff like that.
And were these similar planes to what you had down in San Antonio, or were they better planes?
They were better ones. That's where we had some Fiat planes. Well, these were standard planes, had a Fiat motor.
That's a French plane?
No, it was American.
American?
Had a Fiat, that's an Italian motor. And we had a bunch of these Curtiss OX-5s I told you about a while ago, and then we had some Wright airplanes. They had a Hall Scott motor in them. Anyhow, they'd all fly pretty good, you know.
Were you able to get all your parts, or did you have to make a lot of them?
No, we didn't make no parts. Well, they did. Some of them had carpenters, and at that time these longerons and struts and all this stuff were made out of wood.
Mm-hmm.
We had carpenters, see, just genuine carpenters. They had woodworking tools, and they make some of these struts, of course.
You know, Mr. Kerr, I never did, being a carpenter, but I never did dream of a carpenter building an airplane.
Well, that's what they had to do. They had to make these things out of wood, see.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, they really made them out of straight grain wood, and that light
fur
and all that stuff, and then a bunch of it was oak, fuselage struts and stuff was strong. They was made square, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the
About 2-inch square or something like that.
braces across.
And then they had to put canvas on the wings?
Well, they used cloth. It was linen.
Linen, and then they doped it or something?
Doped it, that stretched it, and tied it. Linen was real strong.
Mm-hmm.
But anyhow, when we got up on Long Island, all we done was drill, more or less. There was a lot of doughboys and artillery. That whole darn thing was covered with soldiers.
Do you know why they call them doughboys? Or did you ever hear?
Well, I've heard, but I forgot.
I don't know. I was just wondering why they called them that.
Anyhow, in the night at 10 o'clock, it was the prettiest town. You could stand out there and they'd blow this taps at night, the bugle. And that thing would, that thing broke down.
No, I couldn't hear.
And the bugle called that the watches wouldn't all be alike. You'd hear one over here, and about the time you was asked to, by the time you get through, there's about 30 or 40 bugles all over blowing taps.
They were blowing bugles. They weren't playing cornets or something like that.
And of course, we'd been in the Air Force. We were supposed to be a notch above these other guys that did infantry and stuff. We were supposed to have a little better uniforms, but we didn't have.
Did your uniforms fit?
Well, not too good. And we could wear leather leggings, see, that's infantrymen and artillery, they wore canvas leggings. And they even had us in barracks up there on Long Island. Them guys, they didn't think much of the Air Force because they babied us around.
They were doing all the work.
Yeah, they were doing taking all the hard stuff. Anyway, we finally got ready to go. Thing come up on the bulletin board. And they shipped us from Long Island. But while we was there, he talked about the Jews on Saturdays and Sundays. Why, most of them seemed to be Jewish folks, would come out there in a big automobile, and I guess they'd call up the officer in charge of you, and they'd come around and said, well, there's some people wants to take you out for a Sunday dinner. If anybody wants to go, I want you to shine your shoes and get yourself cleaned up and be up here at the office at such and such a time. And these darn people would take you up there, and while they just treat you like you King George or somebody.
You didn't mind. Did you go on one of these trips with them?
Well, yeah, once, but I was kind of bashful. I didn't.
You bashful?
Yeah, I was kind of bashful. But anyway, when we got ready to leave, why, they sent us down to Philadelphia on the train, and we got on an English ship. His Majesty's ship, the Northland.
The name was Northland?
Yeah, everything was His Majesty's, HS.
Uh-huh.
The HS Northland.
This was a steamship too, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, this is a big one. Here's a passenger boat. We're lucky. And we got down there and got into the depot, and right off about an hour or two, they marched us on this boat about time for dinner, you know. And we went in there, and they had the table set, and they had silverware, and there's about, 300 or 400 of us, I guess. 3 or 4 companies. And we thought, well, my gosh, we really fell into something here. We ate that dinner, and they took out to sea, you know. This boat kind of took out by itself. And when it comes supper time, why, it's the same old thing. They opened up a window and you went through there with your tent with your mess kit. And we'll laugh at that table stuff.
And then from there went over to England. Did you get seasick going over?
I didn't. But right on, we went out into the dang time we got about halfway. We got into the dang, you talk about wind blowing. You think it's blowing Oklahoma just to get out on that ocean. I'm telling you, that ship was just going hee-haw and every other way.
Oh, your hee-haws didn't stop it either.
Waves are coming splashing up over the side, and them crazy guys had us out doing guard duty. I never could figure that out. They had me out there. Only I had a club, you know, a broomstick about that long. I don't know
what those 2-foot clubs, eh?
They could have nobody got anyway close there, nothing tall. All the English people on the ship is run by English people. And you just had to hang on to something. It just blow you. Like that, if you move, by gosh,
you might go overboard.
I'd go overboard. You don't
Well, why did you need guard duty up there?
Well, that's what I never could figure out. But anyway, these guys, about 2/3 of them are seasick. They had tubs sitting in there, and them guys, boy, that's enough to make you seasick.
That just smell is nothing else.
But I never got a darn bit sick.
How long did it take you to get over? Well, where did you go? France
We
or?
went to England.
Well, how long did it take you to get there? You know?
Well, I think we got into this storm, and we were supposed to go to Halifax, Nova Scotia, to join a convoy.
Uh-huh.
Well, we got up to Halifax, and they'd had a storm or something in there. When we went to going in, why, I guess this same storm. But there's boats, big old boats, that's part of it shoved up on the shore, and we thought they'd had a naval battle or something. We didn't know what the dickens was going on.
What time of the year was this? Do you
It
remember?
was in the wintertime.
Oh, I was wondering about a hurricane, but it wasn't a hurricane.
Oh, it was a windstorm of goodness. And we stayed up, I think, in Halifax about 2 weeks, and we organized parties and went out and helped clean things up, you know.
Mhm.
We took up a collection of money, I think, $1,400 for relief fund and stuff like that. And we finally got started across with this convoy, and we landed at Liverpool.
How many ships were in your convoy? You
Oh,
remember?
it's about 7 or 8 or 10, I don't remember.
Did you have any scares with submarines or anything like that?
Only thing, we was out, the sun was shining, and of course it was kind of cold, and windy, and the waves were pretty good. A bunch of us saw something off over there about, kind of like on the horizon, and we thought it was a submarine. And we called one of them English sailors and pointed out that there's a submarine out there. So he said, that's no submarine, that's a bloody whale.
That's a whale of a start. Now, you were doing this in the wintertime, and the waves are breaking over your ship. Was it freezing on the ship?
Well, probably there wasn't no chunk of ice, that I remember. But it was, when we got to Halifax, I know that it was 17 below zero. But it didn't seem cold, it was still. I know you didn't notice the cold, but if you wasn't careful, you noticed it pretty soon. You noticed it was getting kind of cold.
Halifax, is that in Nova Scotia?
Yeah.
And then
we
they...
landed at Liverpool, and one of the best sights was they had that net, you know, that down over the entrance to the harbor.
Yeah. Was it a steel net?
Yeah, I guess it was a big steel net. We got there in the night. We had our convoy had the circle keep moving, you know. And the next morning when I woke up, there's about 7 or 8 or 10 of these little U.S. destroyers just going all around and all through there.
These were English destroyers?
No, American.
Oh, American, okay.
American flag. That was quite a sight.
You thought you'd come home, didn't you?
Yeah. But we got into Liverpool and docked, and of course he'd been feeding off the English all this time. We wasn't feeding too good, we thought.
Did you have a lot of tea?
We got in there early in the morning and pulled up along the dock, and that big German ship, the name of the story was the Leviathan. I think they came to the Northland or something or other. What was it? Anyway, they changed the name. Man, that was a monster.
What did you say it was, the Vaterland?
Yeah, that's the name that the Germans named.
It was a ship they captured from the Germans?
Captured up west in Germany. They caught it at a port when they declared war.
Was it a passenger ship?
Yeah, it was very big one. It was twice bigger than the one we was on, and it was pretty good size. And I think our ship was 400 or 500 feet long. I think that other one was about 900 feet.
That's a lot of ship, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, there's a sign there, over there, there's a brick building, the one up there about 7, 8, 10 stories. Brick building, big sign on there that says Kerr's Dog Biscuit.
So the Kerr came home.
Yeah.
Was that about Kerr?
Yeah, Kerr's Dog Biscuit. And these guys said, well, by gosh, as soon as you can get off of this boat, I want you to go to your folks over there and bring back a bunch of them dog biscuits so we can have something to eat.
You're going to get a good meal for a day, then.
So we got off the boat and stayed around there a day or two, I guess, to see if any of us got sick or something. And
You mean sick with the American food or the dog food?
we still under the English food. So, and we went across the train to Southampton on the train. And
were those trains a little different than the ones you worked on in Oklahoma?
Oh, boy. I'm telling you something, them things got up and moved.
They did?
Boy,
They had big wheels on them, a lot bigger than an American.
they really did get yonder. And we got over there and we just kind of unloaded off of the train, and then we got on a side wheel. Now that's kind of odd. It's a side wheel boat like these river boats.
Oh,
only
yeah?
bigger.
That's going across the channel.
Passed across the channel. And so we got on that thing, and I was a pretty good buddy with there's a lot of smart guys in our outfit. That's early in there, and there's a mining engineer and an electrical engineer and some bunch of real smart guys, my buddies. And they said, now, just as soon as we get started, they said, we know where there's a warm spot, there's cold too.
What was this, a ferry boat?
I don't know what it was. It was a boat that carried troops across the town. It moved too, don't think it didn't. They say it run about 30 knots an hour, that's better than 30 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Well, I was interested in that steam engine. They have a big steam engine, and down in there, I went down in the boiler room, or the engine room, and the steam, that big cylinder, and the crank was fastened onto that wheel, the paddle wheel, you know. Man, that thing just going like that. That boat was really going. And these guys,
Did it have a paddle wheels on both sides of it?
I think it's clear across the back, but it's
It's in the back of it.
splitting in half.
Uh-huh.
And they said you would just go up on the top. They have different decks that they did. Just over this screw, but it's where this smokestack is. It'll be warm. That's the darn thing, these staterooms in that. If you look in there, it just looks like a bunch of heads. There's a dang many people in there, their heads are just sticking up. And he says, there won't be crowds up on that top deck with that smokestack. Sure enough, we went up there and there's only darn ones up there.
And it was warm.
Nice and warm. Big.
Were there all troops that were going across the channel?
Yeah. There's all our outfit and 2 or 3 more. There's about 150 in a company. See. I think there's about 300 or so on this little
300 on
boat.
a little ship. It was pretty well packed, eh?
With it run into a submarine, we were all around it.
You scared each other to death.
Well, I never was particularly scared. I just didn't worry about it.
How long did it take to go get across the channel?
It took so darn long because we landed at Bordeaux.
That was France?
Yeah. Landed about, we left in the night. And the next morning we was in Bordeaux, up by the wharf. And they left us off. I don't know whether I ought to tell this or not.
Oh, you put as good as that.
On that tape.
I don't care. If you want to, I'd be glad to hear it.
Well, every once in a while in the Army they had what they call an aerial inspection.
The short arm inspection.
Yeah, that was it. I'll be a son of a gun. We'd been on this boat and all this stuff all that time for about a month. And as we left off of that boat there, cold in the morning, I'll be a son of a gun if they didn't have that inspection.
Standing out there in the cold. right on the wharf?
Right on the dock. When we come out, stepped up on the dock, there was the doctor. Down and away you go.
Sometimes I think the doctors enjoy doing that.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, they lined us up then. We marched up through town and way up on the hill. And these officers, of course, they knew a little bit about this deal over there. They had these trees along the side of a building. There's this little old fence there about so high, and it had this trough running water, and you walk in there and relieve your kidneys. See, but man,
you didn't want it for a while.
That's something else to get used to. People just walking along there, the women and the men and everybody just walking right along here, and there you was. But anyway, we got up on this hill, and they put us out in a kind of a stockade with the wires around it, and dang little tents, you know. Kept us up there, in the snow on the ground. There's Scottish soldiers up there, and they had a bunch of these outfits from Africa, some of His Majesty's African troops. And we started down some of them, there's blacks, see. Some of them had their teeth filed like a buzzsaw. You see
Yeah.
pictures of them, but that was a fact. They opened their mouth and it looked like this buzzsaw.
How about the Scotsmen? Did they have kilts?
Yeah.
That must have been pretty cold.
Yeah, it was. I got intrigued with the one Scotsman there. They had them marching guards around the Ellis and German prisoners over there in another pen with a big wire. They had these Scotch soldiers walking sentries or guards around there. This big old Scotsman was walking back and forth there in our tent right out there. So I went over there and I didn't know him very much, you know, and I walked on with this Scotsman. He didn't pay any attention. He had that gun up there and he was walking on him. He walked down, I walked along the side, and about halfway back, and I noticed he had socks on about so far, and then his pants come down about so far. And in between there, his legs were just as red as the dickens.
They were cold.
So pretty soon I said, my gosh, man, ain't your knees cold? He says, is your nose cold?
He answered your question, didn't he?
So I decided he wasn't going to talk much, so I left. Yeah, I can see him now, great big old gaunt son of a gun. Anyway, we went on from there, and we got quarantined with the measles for about time one guy get well, another one break down. Finally wound up at the Aviation Instruction Center, and we pretty well stayed there training these aviators all during the war.
What kind of planes were they using over there in France?
Well, we had French planes. We had, them Frenchmen had one plane. We had bombers.
Was it Havilland? Was it the
That was
Havilland?
English.
Oh.
We had, they put those Liberty motors in them Havilland planes. They wasn't too good. They was all made out of wood like the rest of them. They'd fly fast, but they couldn't carry no load. They didn't have no much lift to them. And all about the only thing they was fit for was to take pictures, fly over, and they were fast. See? They could just about outfly anything and take these pictures and get gone.
Let's see, did another English plane, wasn't the Sopwith?
Sopwith, and then they had Sopwith Camels. But we didn't have them, was the only ones we had, and we had French planes. They were named Breguet, Brigade. And they was a real airplane now.
Oh, was it 2-passenger?
Yeah. They had aluminum struts and all the longerons and spars and everything. They called it dur aluminum. It was real light and heavy. Not heavy, real light and, strong. Tough. You couldn't bend it on stuff. It was just tougher to boot. And
They were a fast plane too?
Yeah, they put them together with like pipe cages. They come in length about so long, that pipe, and we line them all up, and they had places on there that you melted sulfur and poured in there, and that fastened them together. And them was good planes. Them things would fly. They had a 12-cylinder motor in them.
Was it air-cooled or water-cooled motor?
All of them water-cooled. Some of those, them English planes, some of them was in radio motors. They was air-cooled.
And they were shooting through the props on those, weren't they? Shooting machine guns through the props?
Yeah. Yeah, we had to time them things through the propellers. I come down here getting near side, come getting shot. It was one of them things.
You went off by accident?
No. We had these planes setting, see, and there's something wrong with some of the controls on I think it was on the flippers on the side that made a tip, and you move this lever, and it kind of slipped out of a pulley, or it got too loose some way. And I was just up in there fixing that, and had the wing they had a kind of a trap door where these hinges and things were, and pulleys. And I was working on that, and there's a dang guy behind in the place, working on the machine gun. And that dang thing went off, and boy, it went right through that wing, didn't miss my head very darn far.
Well, it was close enough to be all right.
When that thing hit that thing, just like it made a heck of a pop.
Uh-huh. And you stayed in Paris or somewhere all through the war, that you in the landing?
We were near Paris during the war. We was in, Rand. Ferrand. That's funny. Can't figure it had another name, too. We had a, I'll be darned. That's before it started getting old, I guess.
You said it, I was just listening.
Fairmont.
What?
Fairmont Ferrand.
Oh.
Ferrmont Ferrand. They had a big airfield there.
Now, you stayed all over there during the war, and actually you didn't get any combat. You were always behind the lines, keeping the planes going. And then when the war was over, or the armistice, you were in Paris at that time.
Well, here's the funny part of that was, when you was over in France so all the time, why you do a leave of absence.
That's the R&R or something that order.
Something like that. They had resorts bought, the government did, down on the seacoast and different places. A leave area, they call it. And they furnished you transportation, and all of it was paid for, except that you went uptown and bought something where you had to pay for it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And a bunch of these same guys that was up around the smokestack, we still all together. And we decided, well, we've been over about 15 or 16 months then. We was always busy. They wouldn't let us go. So we decided that, well, maybe we put in now we get one. So we put in for this leave area, and sure enough,
Just like that.
just like that. So we got on this train.
Well, wait, let's go back again. Are the English trains and the French trains different, or basically the same?
More or less kind of like.
Uh-huh.
Most of the trains that the common people ride on are just a coach with compartments in it that you get on from the outside.
But they don't have any center aisle or anything?
Well, some of the better higher price trains have an aisle along the side and there's compartments in there like that. They don't have any open ones that I recall with the aisle down like we do.
Mm-hmm.
They have these compartments where you can go in there and be yourself. But anyway, we started. We hadn't gone very far till we got up here. We noticed every town we'd come to where the people were just hollering and waving and hugging one another. We thought they were crazy. We didn't know what's the matter with them. So by God, we got kind of wondering about it. We had one guy talk a little French for the next station we come to. He got out to find out what's going on. Sure enough, they said that the Garrity, the armistice, they'd signed an armistice, see? And boy, we talk about, we're going to be heavily on the train to Paris, and we got to take a train to Paris. When we got to Paris, well, you couldn't have, I'll tell you what, there must have been 100,000 people in the streets. I never saw anything like it.
You had a ball on your final leave.
Yeah.
But you know what, pretty soon, we don't have to shut it down yet, but we're going to pretty soon. And I'll tell you, one of our disadvantages here, Mr. Kerr, is we're not going to be able to touch everything.
Well, that's it.
And no, that isn't what I mean. We're pretty full in detail up to what we're going now, but there's so much detail yet, because we have a few more minutes on this tape. And then there's the detail of getting home from Paris in the United States. And how long were you in Paris before you left?
Oh, we just there 3 or 4 days.
And then you took a ship and...
No, heck no. We went down on this leave area, and of course we was absent without leave for 4, 5, 6 days. ordinarily they put you in the slammer for that. They didn't pay no attention to it. We was all sergeants anyway.
You finally made sergeant grade.
Oh, yeah.
Where did you make sergeant?
When got halfway, I was a technician. I was listed as a chauffeur for back to all time I was in France because I was a mechanic, see. And you got the sergeant's pay, but you were still a bus driver. You had no room for so many sergeants, see. So you have a lot of chauffeurs. So
the chauffeur was the sergeant, in other words.
Sergeant's pay. Anyhow, we after the armistice time, we got back. They started us on our way home.
Did you take off from Paris or France on the way? Or did you go to England?
We left right there where we was from Clermont-Ferrand. Went down to Bordeaux. And then they stuck us down there in Bordeaux out on the coast of the ocean there for about a month or two to see if the armistice was going to hold, I guess. And then finally we got on this ship and come home.
You didn't go to England before you went home?
We come right straight home.
And you landed in New York?
And New York was right down past the old lady.
Liberty.
And I got into trouble right there too.
You had to run off with her?
No, with Patrick Gawson, our first sergeant. We was lined up out there on the dock, and the street was right there, but there's a wire fence. And boy, there's all the girls and everybody was looking over at them soldiers back from France.
You were looking right back.
Enthralled, you know.
Incidentally, while we're talking right here, when you landed on the dock in New York, you didn't have a short arm inspection.
No, we didn't have it. But anyway, they count off. These are formed into squads, and they got our attention, and they count off. They counted off once, and I stood there. I was the sergeant ahead of the company. Well, I didn't say nothing. I was busy watching. So they said, Pat, he looked down there, you know, he's been in the Army about 30 years off of this but he's strict in the day. So he ordered, count off, Jim. Come down there to me, no answer. So here he comes. Right up in front of me, he said, Sergeant Kerr, what's the matter with you? Can't you count? I woke up. Next time he comes along, I tell him.
Yeah, you forgot the girl. I'll tell you what, Mr. Kerr, we're going to have to shut this off. We're almost out of tape. And with your permission, we'll shut it off now. And some of these days I'd like to continue. I'd like to take off. You know, we got you back in the United States. You can remember that. And would it be agreeable with you for some time I come up here and take you the rest of the way? And I won't interfere with the golf game.
Well,
you can't play golf today.
There's a lot more to it. During my lifetime, I've seen a lot of things happen. You know, the mail carrier come on a horse. First when they got the mail, and then they come in a little cart, and later on a motorcycle, and then later on an automobile. And
all that thing developed, and we want to get into that the next time, if you don't mind. I would like to talk to you again on this, and I believe right now we're going to have to shut this off. And I've been very fortunate in talking to
I didn't know what this was going on.
This is your life.
Yeah.
We've been talking with Mr. Kerr for the last couple hours. We didn't expect to talk this long, but I think the guy is pretty interesting. And this is Richard Garrity interviewing for the Living Legends of Oklahoma. And this will be eventually in the files. And we've had wonderful cooperation with Mr. Kerr. I mean Kerr, not Kerr. Kerr is something you drink. As we said before, he is not related in any way to Governor Kerr. And probably if he had a choice, he wouldn't be anyway. I think at this point we'll shut it off.
Well, I think